The questions begin. Senators ask Catholic Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett about abortion, guns, and health care. We have team coverage, including scenes from protests outside of the nation's highest court. Feeling better. President Donald Trump rallies crowds in Florida a week after recovering from COVID-19. And gift to a pope. How the Holy Father is using a building loaned to him by an order of religious sisters in Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Day 2 of the confirmation hearing for Supreme Court nominee Judge Amy Coney Barrett, as senators get the chance to directly ask questions to the nominee herself. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us live from a booth overlooking the judiciary hearing with the latest.
Well, Tracy, abortion, gun rights, and of course her Catholic faith were all on display today. Now, Judge Barrett was asked a number of times about how she would vote on particular issues and cases, and she ended up firing back using the words of the late Justice Ginsburg, where she said, "No hints, no forecasts, no previews." And it didn't take long for Democrats to ask about her right to life issues, and one of which came from Senator Dianne Feinstein of California.
Do you agree with Justice Scalia's view that Roe was wrongly decided?
If I express a view on a precedent one way or another, whether I say I love it or I hate it, it signals to litigants that I might tilt one way or another in a pending case.
It's distressing not to get a straight answer. So let me try again. Do you agree with Justice Scalia's view that Roe was wrongly decided?
Again, I can't pre-commit or say, yes, I'm going in with some agenda, because I'm not. I don't have any agenda. I have no agenda to try to overrule Casey. I have an agenda to stick to the rule of law and decide cases as they come.
Moving on from legalized abortion, Democrats challenge Judge Barrett on whether convicted felons should lose their constitutional rights.
But using a felony conviction someone's passed to deny them the right to vote is all right?
Senator, what I said was that the Constitution contemplates that states have the freedom to deprive felons of the right to vote. It's expressed in the constitutional text, but I expressed no view on whether that was a good idea.
Republicans criticize Democrats for trying to get Judge Barrett to take a position on issues that could come before the court.
On no planet is it appropriate for anybody to suggest that that's a political talking point for you to say, I'm not going to indicate how I'm going to rule in a particular case?
As I was saying earlier, it's not the law of Amy, it's the law of the American people.
Well, many of the senators actually used their time to ask her questions. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas used his time to kind of create a speech about religious liberty and talked about the importance of this hearing because many of the cases that go before the Supreme Court are decided by a vote of 5-4. Tracy?
Eric, during the hearing, a question came up about a speech that she made to students was criticized by Democrats.
That's right. It was a 2006 speech that she made at Notre Dame University to law students. It was a commencement speech where she talked about working for the kingdom of God and expanding the kingdom of God. As we know, as Catholics, we are expected to not only work for our job, but also work for God and expand the kingdom. And that upset a lot of the Democratic senators, and they asked her about that. But as we know, it's just part of our Catholic faith. Tracy?
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill for us tonight. While the hearings on Capitol Hill have been underway across the street, the Supreme Court has been buzzing with activity. Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, we're getting a chance to hear Americans raise their voices as this confirmation process continues inside the Capitol. Here's what's been happening behind me at the highest court in the land.
With the confirmation hearings underway at the U.S. Capitol, the Supreme Court is alive with excitement.
Fill that seat!
Those for and against the confirmation of Judge Amy Coney Barrett gathering outside the Supreme Court, where Judge Barrett could have a major impact. Sarah Wallace came from Chicago to voice her opposition.
People can't afford the insurance bills and can't afford the medication.
Wallace shared similar concerns expressed by Democrats on Capitol Hill. that if Amy Coney Barrett becomes a Supreme Court justice, the Affordable Care Act won't survive at the high court and low-income Americans will suffer.
The ACA is abolished. They will not have health care. They will die. They will die.
Some Democrats demand a confirmation vote be held after the election. But this woman supports President Trump's nomination of Judge Barrett.
He has the right to do it.
Conservatives here hope Judge Barrett will soon fill that vacant Supreme Court seat. Pro-life signs raised in support of the Catholic mother of 7.
And talking to both supporters and protesters of Judge Barrett's confirmation, I'm told they'll be out here again tomorrow as the hearings continue. Tracy?
Correspondent Mark Ines reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Mark. Well, John Malcolm, Vice President of the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation, joins me now on Skype. John, welcome back. Good to have you on again. I want to start out by getting your impression of Judge Amy Coney Barrett as she takes questions from the senators, and no notes we saw for her. She's all answering the questions kind of on the fly, so to speak. Pretty impressive.
Yes, look, she's a stellar nominee, and she was grilled the first time she was before this committee in 2017. I've described her performance then as grace under fire, and I would say the same now. She's implacable when she gets speeches questioning, her integrity and whether she has kept her word that she didn't make any promises to any of the senators or to President Trump about how she would rule in this case or that case, and that she will keep an open mind. Many of the Democratic senators have suggested that she already has made up her mind on a number of these important issues, and she has remained calm in the face of all of that. I think she's doing a superb job.
We've heard her talk previously about the influence of Justice Scalia that he had on her. What did you think when she said that if confirmed, quote, you would not be getting Justice Scalia, you would be getting Justice Barrett? What kind of message do you think that sent?
Well, she made it very clear that even if you are an originalist and a textualist, which was Justice Scalia's philosophy that she has embraced, that doesn't mean you always reach the same result. She pointed out that Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia would, on occasion, come out with different results, even though they were both committed textualists and originalists. And she also made it very clear that even while she was clerking for Justice Scalia, she didn't always agree with him, although, of course, when she was clerking for him, it was his view that prevailed.
The Affordable Care Act, which is being challenged before the Supreme Court next month, and Judge Barrett's position on Roe versus Wade continues to be a reoccurring line of questioning from Democrats. How much of that do you think is being influenced by the upcoming presidential election, if at all?
Oh, I think a lot of this is about the upcoming presidential election. Obviously, the theme that the Democrats have chosen to go with as their predominant theme involves a challenge to the Affordable Care Act. They are pointing out that President Trump is no fan of either Roe versus Wade or the Affordable Care Act, and they are suggesting that the fix is in and that a Justice Barrett has already promised about what she would do with the pending Affordable Care Act case or about a future challenge to Roe. She's made it very, very clear that she has an open mind on all of these things and would consider the particular case in controversy that would come before her after considering the arguments of counsel and consulting with her colleagues, and that as she doesn't have an agenda either in favor of or against the Affordable Care Act, that those policy judgments belong with the senators and the folks in the House of Representatives.
John, concerns were brought up about the influence of so-called dark money from outside interest groups. Let's talk a little bit more about that and how that relates to Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation.
Well, so Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, he's done this in many other occasions with other nominees, is suggesting that there is somehow dark money, big corporate interests who are involved in supporting particular nominees or filing particular lawsuits on behalf of conservative organizations. He rarely mentions the fact that there are folks on the left who do precisely the same thing, something that Senator Cruz pointed out. But the fact of the matter is that these judges are people of integrity, they are independent, and they are life tenured. And they are life tenured for a good and sufficient reason, which is to remove themselves from these sorts of political considerations.
One of the things she also talked about was her personal story of raising 2 black children, and about racism and the impact of the death of George Floyd and what it had on her family. That was a pretty emotional moment. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, she made it quite clear that racism persists and that she watched the George Floyd the video of the George Floyd killing with her, her daughter Vivian, and also with her son John Peter, who were two black children that she and her husband Jesse adopted from Haiti, and that they wept, and that she had to explain all of this to her 10-year-old daughter Juliet, and that the persistence of racism in our society and the bad things that can flow from that have been part of a continuing conversation that she's had with her family. It was a very poignant moment and quite heartfelt, obviously.
Yeah, it definitely was. Well, John Malcolm, thank you so much for your time. John Malcolm, Vice President of the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. We thank you again for your analysis.
Good to be with you.
Hot on the campaign trail with just 3 weeks to go until November 3rd. President Donald Trump visits Pennsylvania tonight. His rival Joe Biden is in Florida, and Vice President Mike Pence makes a stop in Wisconsin, the Badger State. Both sides trading barbs on Twitter as well. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, President Trump is back on the campaign trail. Now, last night marked his post-COVID-19 return to big crowds and loud cheers. And today on Twitter, he said he's got several more campaign events lined up this week as he battles it out with Joe Biden.
Hello, Sanford. It's great to be with you. Thank you. It's great to be back.
The big return. President Donald Trump back in action, firing up his supporters.
But it's great to be back in my home state, Florida, to make my official return to the campaign trail.
The president says their prayers helped.
I am so energized by your prayers and humbled by your support. We've had such incredible support. And here we are. Here we are.
Heading into the final stretch, while the president's crowds have been huge compared to Democrat Joe Biden's, the only numbers that matter in the end, of course, will be at the voting booth. Polls compiled by Real Clear Politics show President Trump trailing in key swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. President Trump retweeted this: "The only way to prove the polls are fake is to turn out and vote on Election Day like never before." And former Vice President Joe Biden tweeting today, "Donald Trump has been trying to throw out Obamacare for years." There's also this Joe Biden attack ad.
Trump's pushing to slash Medicare benefits.
The president says Republicans will be providing far better health care than the Democrats at a far lower cost.
People of faith had no greater champion than President Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence made a campaign stop today in Wisconsin, where President Trump barely eked out a victory back in 2016.
With 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House, we're going to respect the religious freedom of every American of every faith. So help us God.
Also tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court says it will not hear a case brought by congressional Democrats against President Trump that claims the president illegally profits off of his presidency. Earlier, an appeals court dismissed it. Tracy?
White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Owen. The top opposition leader in Belarus is threatening to call a nationwide strike. The government is responding. The interior minister says the country will continue to maintain a police presence at the weeks-long protest over the disputed presidential election. The minister also says, if necessary, security forces will maintain order by using firearms. The Vatican's criminal court is set to begin a trial of 2 Italian priests. One is accused of sexual abuse at a priest seminary inside of Vatican City. The other is accused of covering up the alleged crime. It is believed to be the first criminal prosecution for abuse allegedly committed in the Holy See's own territory. An order of religious sisters in Rome offers Pope Francis the use of its building to welcome refugees. Vatican official Cardinal Konrad Krajewski thanks the sisters for their response to the Pope's call to help migrants. The center will be overseen by the community of Sant'Egidio. It is a Catholic association dedicated to peacekeeping, immigration, and works of charity. Joining us now with more information is EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colin Flynn. Colin, thanks so much for joining us. So why did the religious sisters decide to lend their building to Pope Francis?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, yes, some very good news from Rome today. This order of sisters, the Sister Servants of Divine Providence of Catania, they decided in response to Pope Francis's recent encyclica Fratelli Tutti to take one of their buildings that was unused here in Rome and lend it to the Vatican. Now, that's an important distinction to make. They're not donating and handing a building over. They're loaning it for an undetermined period of time to be used in the area of refugees and asylum seekers. Now, this is something that, of course, we reported on here on News Nightly last week. When he released the encyclical, Pope Francis, in it he spoke about a number of things, but the overarching thing was a wounded world. He talked about poverty, the plight of war, and something that has always been close to the pontiff's heart, of course, immigration. He said in it that we all have to be brothers and sisters. That's the title, Fratelli Tutti, brothers and sisters together, and do everything in our power as people of faith, people of all faiths, and people who have no faith at all, to show hospitality, to give shelter to immigrants. And in response to this, the religious order reading this, they've decided to hand over one of their buildings. The building will be used as a shelter, short-term shelter, not a long-term stay, for those people who are entering through the humanitarian corridors into Italy. There they'll be able to get the basic needs of food, education, medicine, if they need it. And also they'll be helped to get a job once they leave the shelter so that they can integrate into Italian society and become fully independent. The shelter will be open to all immigrants who come, but will particularly focus on women who are on their own, women with vulnerable children, and families. Now, in response to this, the Pope thankfully accepted it. He handed over the control and has entrusted the management of the building and the day-to-day operations to the community of Sant'Egidio. They have been looking after immigrants for a number of years. They're experts in this area. And just before we come on air, I spoke to Monica Arias. She works with the community, and she told me more about the building and what they hope to use it for.
It has 60 places and mainly family rooms and single rooms with facilities, which is very important. And it will be organized like a house, like a family, really.
Colm, do we know the condition of the building, and do we know when it will be ready to be open?
We're not exactly sure of the condition of the building, but just before we came on air, when I was speaking to Monica, she did tell me that it is fit for purpose. It has the facilities to cater for these women and these families, and they hoping to open it as soon as November the 1st, so that's in just a number of weeks. She did tell me on the phone that they have a line of immigrants who are waiting to get shelter, who need space, so there is a sense of urgency about this. Now, of course, with COVID-19, with the cases still increasing here in Italy, as in many other parts of the world, I'm sure they will have to take extra precautions in how they will ensure social distancing, how they will ensure the safety of all the women and the families who are coming in to use it.
Oh, thank you so much, Colm. Colm Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you for your report.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, a view of Judge Amy Coney Barrett from one of her former students. My next guest is sharing her personal experience as a student of Judge Amy Coney Barrett at Notre Dame's Law School and adding her voice of support for Judge Barrett's nomination. Laura Walk, former student of Judge Amy Coney Barrett and former clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas, joins me now on Skype. Laura, welcome. Great to have you on the show. I want to go back a few years to 2013 and your first days at Notre Dame. I know you wrote a piece in which you described Judge Barrett as an answer to your prayers. Tell us why you said that and the ways in which she helped you specifically in resolving an assistive technology issue that you're having.
Yeah, so Judge Barrett really intervened for me at a very critical moment in my law school career. I use assistive technology basically to complete all tasks in the classroom. And as luck would have it, when I arrived at Notre Dame, my personal technology began to fail, and the institution had not yet gotten its own technology. So overnight, I basically was left completely stranded without any technology to use. Judge Barrett swooped in. She intervened and advocated for me and was able to obtain technology from the school much more quickly than I would have been able to do on my own. And I really think that this set me up for success and eventually to apply for my clerkship, because truly, if I had not been able to get the technology and study and excel at my classes that first semester, it's really uncertain whether I would have been placed on the track to even consider the amazing opportunities that I've had since then.
Laura, what was it about Judge Barrett that made you feel, so comfortable in seeking counsel as a mentor from her?
Well, I think some of the qualities that hopefully if people are watching the hearings that the American people are now coming to see for themselves. She's incredibly warm and compassionate and also extremely intelligent. So I sought her out for that unique and very rare combination of characteristics, because I knew not only she would be able to give me the practical advice, but I was very pleasantly surprised and gratified by the compassion that she showed me as well.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to ask you this last question. Last year, you became the first blind woman to clerk on the Supreme Court. How did Judge Barrett support you as you embarked on that journey? Did she give you any advice?
She did. She and I spoke at length about what it felt like to be maybe a feeling as though you don't really have any community or any mentors to help you along the way. I reached out to her when I was feeling overwhelmed, just for pep talks, and she really was instrumental in helping to keep up my self-confidence and to make sure that I believed in myself and knew that I was there for a reason and I could trust that I would do a good job.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all that with us. We really appreciate it. Laura Wolk, former student of Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Thanks again, Laura.
Thanks.
Up next, what the U.S. Secretary of Labor is saying about Christopher Columbus. Yesterday was Columbus Day, and a couple of members of the Trump administration spent the day defending Christopher Columbus. Vice President Mike Pence made a stop in the capital of Ohio, named for the explorer. Local media report the vice president made comments on the taking down of the statues of Christopher Columbus around the United States. He said, quote, "We will not allow our country to have all of its history and culture taken away." Secretary of Labor Eugene Scalia was also in Ohio yesterday and defending the legacy of Christopher Columbus. In a speech at Franciscan University of Steubenville, Secretary Scalia said in part, quote, "In the face of sharp hostility associated with religion and national origin, Columbus became a powerful symbol of the claim of Italian, Irish, and other Catholic immigrants that they were fully American." And finally, tonight, a statue honoring the first U.S. citizen to be canonized as saint was dedicated yesterday in New York City. The artist says that she wanted to depict St. Francis Xavier Cabrini doing charitable work.
In our statue, we depict Mother Cabrini with 2 children sailing to the world on her paper boat. The girl is a reflection of Francesca when she was young.
Governor Andrew Cuomo unveiled the statue. It is in Manhattan's Battery Park City. Mother Cabrini died in 1917. She founded nearly 70 schools, hospitals, and orphanages. The Italian-American religious sister especially focused on helping immigrants and the poor. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.